Welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here. It is week 3, and this is the Oklahoma-Tulsa game preview. George, you excited to get back home?
Super excited. I love the 918.
We got to keep the parents up while we're up there?
Of course, we got to. I welcomed you into my home. You denied. You
well,
said that
it
you got
wasn't
a
as
hotel.
much of a denial as much as it is like...
My dad offered to cook steaks for you. And
well, I didn't know that was part of it.
Yeah.
When is that part of it?
You're more than welcome to come over on Friday night to the Stoya household for
there's
going to
be steaks, sir.
There's going to be steaks.
I could bring a bottle of wine.
Bottle of wine would be awesome.
Okay, well, I'll probably plan on doing that.
Oh,
I didn't
awesome.
know that there was dinner over there.
Yeah.
And whatever. I didn't know that there was steaks involved.
Yeah.
Or else I thought this was more of a invite for the sleepover portion of it.
Oh, you can that too?
Well, I got a hotel room, so I just didn't know about if,
We're going to go out on the town too, so it'll be fun.
We're going to head up there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Oklahoma headed up to take on the Golden Hurricane. It is, it's a sellout for the first time, I think, in how
2009?
long? 2009.
Yeah, 14
I think
years.
I've been to Jinx Union games up there that have sold out
yeah.
during like that time period. But, let's be honest. This is a game that Oklahoma should go up there. They're a 26.5, 27-point favorite going into Saturday. And, we've talked about it. We've talked about it here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Thank you for everybody that has watched the Lincoln Riley breakdown and the reaction video that we did on Wednesday. I think that's the record setter for most watched. But, there was some seriousness to it as far as some of the stuff that you did, contacting the Norman Police Department and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, talking to Norman PD about it, getting the incident report was some serious stuff. I definitely got the giggles out too at the beginning of that, thanks to you. But I think we've somewhat moved past that. I mean, Lincoln Riley is probably going to continue to talk about Oklahoma. Oklahoma fans are going to continue to talk about Lincoln Riley. But
sure.
Like this whole week has just been an odd week when you talk about that coming up. Obviously the Levy and Bryle stuff, which we've already talked enough about. So I'm excited to get to Saturday and actually, cover a football game.
9 consecutive wins for Oklahoma in this series. It's actually a little bit closer than I think people probably realize.
Yeah.
It's 27-1 all time. And so it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a little bit of a family reunion of sorts.
Yeah.
You're having a lot of fun right there. You get the.
I get the.
It's just you.
Up. Yeah,
it's just you. It's just an ISO of George. No, it's going to be a lot of fun. But there are some questions I think that are going to be begin to be answered here for this Oklahoma football team. Let's start with the running back position, and that's been something that Oklahoma fans have talked about quite a bit here over the last week. And it kind of centers around two guys in Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk and how they're going to kind of acclimate themselves into this 2023 offense.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You look at the snap counts. That's kind of what I've been looking at this week. And Tawi Walker and Marcus Major have combined for 111 snaps at running back for Oklahoma so far through 2 games. Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk, only 35 snaps combined together so far. And if you would have said that in the offseason, I think a lot of OU fans would have been pretty surprised. I mean, even myself, as someone that has championed both Tawi Walker and Marcus Major,
right?
That's pretty surprising. And some of that is, Gavin Sawchuk's been banged up, didn't go all the way through fall camp, but Javonte Barnes was a guy who rushed for over 500 yards last year, was a big part of the offense, especially in the second half of the season. So I think a lot of people expected him to play a bigger role. We'll see. Maybe they're easing them into it. Maybe it's one of those situations where, hey, we're getting to conference play soon and we want to save those guys, make sure they're fresh. I think we're going to see a healthy dose of both of them this week. I know Jeff Levy talked about it, saying, hey, we want to get 2 and 27 involved. Javonte Barnes, I know we'll roll that clip here in a second, talking about waiting for his opportunity. The thing is, look, they got a really, deep room, but Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk, their ceilings are just a little bit higher than Walker and Major, and so that's why I think eventually those two guys will emerge in that room.
It's kind of funny that we're talking about this as Tawi Walker is coming off of a career-high 117 yards against SMU. And
I think the biggest thing is our
we talked about it.
Kerry Murdoch in the producer room.
No, it's it is funny, though, that we're talking about this and, like, trying to take the ball out of his hands in a way when you look up and you go, oh, he did have a career high against SMU.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tawi Walker's been great, and I don't think any of us are saying, hey, take Tawi off the field. There's a role to be played for Tawi Walker. But is he a guy that's going to break off a 60, 70-yard touchdown run? Probably not.
Yeah.
And that's where I think Gavin and Javonte can come in and play a new role and just give them a different 1-2 punch than maybe what they've had so far.
Here is Jeff Lebby as well as Javonte Barnes, who I thought it was interesting to hear from this week, and just staying patient for his opportunity.
I think the biggest thing is our guys got to continue to strain to win one-on-ones. We were just hot and cold. I think I said it after the game. We were a little too conservative at times. Probably should have thrown it around a little bit more to give our guys a little bit of air and give us a chance to make some plays on the perimeter. But we do. We just got to continue to win one-on-ones, get guys in rhythm, really bring along 2 and 27 this week, while continuing to let Tawi get production and having Marcus as a big part of it. So I do love the fact that we've got a stable. We got 4 guys that we trust, that we can count on, but we do want to make more explosive plays in the run game for sure.
Is it possible that Tawi is your best tailback? I mean, that doesn't strike us as possible, but is it possible?
Well, he had the most production Saturday, so again, I do like the fact that we got 4 guys. We got 4 guys that are incredibly capable. We've got guys that have a lot of trust with the entire staff and I think can play at any given time. So the stress, again, is being able to get 2 and 27 going as they've worked themselves back into being in a really good position.
I love it. Me and Levy have a strong connection, and obviously he's going to find a way to get his backs involved. And like he said, we have a deep running back room, so whoever's in there is going to get the job done. And it's been a great week so far, and I'm just ready.
The running back room is so deep. Mm-hmm. How do you stay patient, and how do you best utilize your time when you finally do get on the field?
Yeah, Marcus and Tawi have been doing a great job. They've been doing a great job since spring, and they're showing it right now. So everything they've been doing since spring is showing, and you guys are just seeing it. I've already seen it. So I'm just waiting on my opportunity and my name to be called. As soon as my name is called, I just do my job and make sure I'm taking care of what I got to do and to whatever to do to help the team. Just making sure when we do team reps, because you can't really make up no drills that make people miss in one-on-one. So just making sure team reps, even if it's stud, we're still making a guy miss, making the safety miss if we're one-on-one with that. So just things like that, just little improvement, and that's really on us. So if we're doing team run versus scouts, just make sure we're making them miss. And I think the coaches do a good job with making sure the safeties come up on that and making sure they're trying to punch the ball out and things like that. So,
it's interesting what you said before we went to that clip. It's not like he's a true freshman. Yeah. He's still relatively young in the program, just in his second year in Norman, came in with Gavin Sawchuk. But at the same time, he got a lot of experience a year ago, George.
Yeah, he did. Like I said, he played a lot in the second half of the season. But I do think it was about the third game. I think he got 13 carries last year against Nebraska. And, of course, that was a blowout. But it wasn't until that game that he started really coming on as somebody they were getting the ball to. And you look back, obviously Eric Gray took a lot of those carries last year. He was the bell cow for Oklahoma. I'm not sure Oklahoma will have that this year with just one guy. I think it's going to be a by committee. I do think maybe it'll turn into just 2 guys, and maybe you have a third guy like a Tawi Walker who comes in certain situations. So I think you just got to give it time. I know everybody wants it to happen right away, but I don't think it's a bad thing to have maybe your 2 best running backs as fresh as they are going into conference play here next week.
Yeah, and they're going to need them as Oklahoma heads up to Cincinnati on Saturday. Let's talk defense. That's been a big talking point for a lot of Oklahoma fans after what it seems like is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years maybe that Oklahoma has not been good on the defensive side of the football. It appears through the first 8 quarters this season, and you wrote about this in terms of tackling. We're talking about fundamentally it seems really positive on that side of the football.
Yeah, we talked about it on the previous show, just, the tackling numbers and some of those things, how much improvement they've had there. I think it's, 7 or 10, somewhere between 7 and 10 missed tackles in the first 2 games compared to 33 last year. So through 2 games. So it's been super impressive fundamentally. And look, some of the stats aren't showing up. I know we want to dive into a little bit on the defensive line, and everybody's talking about the pass rush. I think they only have maybe 1 sack through the first 2 games. And some of that's what Arkansas State and SMU were doing, getting the ball out quickly, having 7-8 man type protections. But I think the defensive line's playing pretty good. I mean, you look
No,
at what they've been able to do in the run game, especially. They've been super consistent. I think that they're going to be able to get after Tulsa's quarterback this week. Kevin Wilson's a really good offensive play caller, as Oklahoma fans know. But I do think that Tulsa offensive line will struggle against this group. And, I just think that the defensive line will really start to show up. And we've seen it in the secondary. You see some of these clips. I mean, the secondary's been phenomenal. They've got so many different guys back there. It'll be interesting to see who plays at Cheetah this week. I don't know if we want to get to injuries right now, but it doesn't seem like Justin Harrington's going to play this week. It sounds like maybe Deshaun McCulloch might be able to play. If he can't go either, I wonder, can a Peyton Bowen step in?
Sure.
Those type of guys, a Reggie Pearson move over, Key Lawrence. So they've got a lot of bodies there, but it's that kind of that defensive line that you want to see this week. Can they start getting some of those sacks, those tackles for loss? I think back to last year, Eddie. I think it was through the first 3 games, they were one of the leaders in the country in sacks and tackles for loss. Of course, that didn't translate later in the year, so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And again, I do think the defensive line's maybe playing better than what it shows up in the box score.
It's been a good start, but there is plenty still left to prove. Let's hear from a couple of the defensive players, Key Lawrence, Danny Stutzman, as well as Oklahoma defense coordinator Ted Roof.
We're really playing together, we're running the ball, a lot of strain, a lot of effort, and we're playing for one another. Every single guy, all 11 people on the field, they trust one another, they want each other to succeed, we have each other's backs.
Just hard work, hard-nosed guys, leadership, aggression, how we practice. When we're slipping up tackles, it's not just look past it, we got to redo that play, make the tackle, fit your gaps, play hard, Like I said, being hard-nosed. We got great linebackers like Danny and Jaron holding everybody accountable, holding themselves accountable. D-line, we're grittier, we're stronger, we're fat, we're finishing blocks, running our feet on our tackles and all that, so it's just being more disciplined.
Look at depth, competitive depth, as far as how that goes. We're just starting out. We're by no means a finished product, and we haven't arrived or any of that stuff. We're just a work in progress that's going to go out and grind every day, and that's the attitude that our staff and our players have, and it's all about, incremental improvement, and we've got to get better because we left some plays out on the field the other night, some situations where, we had opportunities to get off the field and didn't, and we got to close the door right there.
Just keep grinding, man. The thing is that we just so hungry, we so eager because we know what we can do and we know what we're capable of, because at the end of the day, we got a lot to show for. You know what I'm saying? We got a lot of recovery to do, if you know what I mean. So we just try to prove to the world wrong, man. We want the mindset, because Boss came in, he said they know, we know, and the whole world know. And we just trying to integrate that into this defense, into this team.
We've got to treat every week like it's our Super Bowl. And, the past is dead, but we've got to watch it, we got to learn from it, and we got to get better. And we know we're going to improve every single week. And our goal is to get better and better so we can become a championship team. And after 2 games, we can't say we're back yet. We got to finish the season and then we'll be back, We got a long way to go.
Let's talk about those 2 guys that we just heard from. Key Lawrence, it's somebody that Bob Prisbillo wrote about on Soonerscoop.com. You can check out that article today, actually, here on Thursday. He's more confident. It seems like he's very comfortable within the defense in his second year under Brandon Hall, as well as Ted Roof and Brent Venables. What do you think has changed for Key Lawrence? That's a guy that I think a lot of people, I don't know about necessarily forgot about, but maybe overlooked as we entered this time of the year.
I think it's a lot of just growing up, right? I think it's a maturation process, and that's what you see from a lot of these guys. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's, in his 4th, 5th year now, coming from Tennessee, and you've seen the athletic ability. I remember when they moved him to corner for a few games back in 2021, and he was able to come in and help a lot. So you knew he had the athletic ability. I think last year, like a lot of guys, it was just a learning process of, where am I supposed to be, understanding the defense, all that mental part that comes with the game. And I think just another year in the system has really helped him. And he was honest with us on whatever day that was, Tuesday, yeah, talking about, hey, I had to grow up a little bit. Brent Venables said the same thing, and he's seen a lot of leadership qualities from Key Lawrence. So he's just another guy. I mean, man, they're playing 6 safeties right now back there. I mean, when was the last time Oklahoma felt that good about what they had on the back end?
And it's not one of those things that they're playing all those guys because they're trying to find people either. Right. They're playing them because I feel like they don't feel like there is much of a drop-off between a bunch of those guys, right?
Right, and when you have guys earning that amount of time, it tells you the effort that's going into practice, because Brent's not a guy that's going to go out there and just play somebody to play him.
Yeah, it's not a charity case to get people out there, right?
Exactly, and so that tells you that these guys are all playing at a very high level in practice. They're all trying to fight for time, and it seems like the camaraderie is in there too. I mean, I know Key was saying, we got so many guys, but we all are rooting for each other. You think of a Robert Spears-Jennings who got in last week, Peyton Bowen, the true freshman's playing great. Obviously, Billy Bowman, Reggie Pearson, two guys that have played a lot of college football. So you're talking about a room that is just incredibly talented, and to see somebody like Key Lawrence, it finally kind of the light turn on for him and hit what is probably his last season of college football is just great to see.
Ethan Downs will serve as the captain when Oklahoma heads up to Tulsa this weekend. He was named to the 2023 AFCA Good Works team for some community service stuff that he was able to do here in the Norman area. I believe with the one of the pantries over on campus and working with the Greeks. He talked about it on Monday night. You can see that interview. He talked about it on Tuesday night. You can see that interview up on Sooner Scoop editorial YouTube channel, where we put all of our post-practice stuff as well as post-game interviews with players as well as coaches. But he's been an interesting player, because I think when he was named to that Big 12 all-preseason team, George, he was a guy that a lot of people, you think of Rondell Bothroyd, you think of our Mason Thomas returning, you think of Trace Ford coming in from Oklahoma State, and you kind of wondered, is he going to get lost in the mix? You look up through 2 games now, and I think he's had a pretty good season. He has one of the 2 sacks that Oklahoma has through the 2 games, joining Danny Stutzman, who was the National Player of the Week on the defensive side of the football for Walter Camp, as well as the Big 12. But Ethan Downs, in-state kid, easy to cheer for. What have you made of his season so far, and maybe that defensive end group, not necessarily as a whole, but some of the returning guys? They need to get our Mason Thomas going as well.
I think Ethan has been arguably their best defensive end, and I know some people might roll their eyes at that. There's a lot of people I was like, really? He's the guy that got chosen for all Big 12? And look, he was a solid player last year, made some mistakes, wasn't always in the right position. I think was maybe a little bit too heavy at times, dropped some weight this offseason. He looks really good physically. I mean, in that video, you could tell the guy has been in the weight room, but I think he's been really solid, man. Like he knows his position. He knows what he's supposed to do. He's getting pressure on the quarterback. He's been really good in the run game, which is something that he kind of struggled at last year, especially setting the edge. So, man, he's been really, really good, and he's a guy that, is he going to flash at you and be somebody that racks up a ton of stats? Probably not, but he's a solid every down player that I think can really help them on the edge. And then you talk about Rondell Bothroyd. We haven't really seen it flash yet, but he's another guy in the run game that's been really, really solid for them on the edge. I think he's played the most snaps of any guy at defensive end. Our Mason Thomas finally got to play this last week. He showed it. I think it was his first snap. He got back there and almost got a sack. So he's a guy that they think can really help in the pass rush. Trace Ford, another guy that we've seen get back there a few times and force maybe some bad throws from the quarterback. That's the thing, is the sacks haven't come, but they're getting back there, forcing some incompletions. Right. And that's what, again, it doesn't show up in the box score all the time, but some of those incompletions are because of what these guys on the end are doing. So I really like that defensive end group. And again, they didn't have much depth there last year. We heard, Ted Roof say competitive depth, take a drink, every time we hear that term, but it's true. I mean, and especially at defensive end, I think they feel really good. PJ Atabare,
I was just getting ready to say PJ's. It seems like he got a lot more snaps a week ago than he did week 1, and I know that they want to get him out on the field as much as possible. Same thing with Peyton Bowen in a way on the back end, but PJ had a couple plays that it was like, okay. That's the guy that you kind of started. Yeah, exactly.
You can see it. The glimpses are there with him. It's just one of those things. I'm sure there's some mental awareness going on, learning the playbook schematically, understanding what exactly they're doing, asking him to do in certain situations. Sure. That's just going to progress over the season. But physically, I mean, the guy is an animal, and I think that he's somebody that can really help when you're talking about the pass rush. He's somebody that can definitely help them in that area.
Plenty of opportunity for Oklahoma's defensive line heading into the week. And tell you what, I don't know much about Tulsa. So we called in our buddy, Cayden McFarland from the NBC affiliate up in Tulsa to preview the Golden Hurricane. For our opponent preview, we now welcome in KJRH Sports Director Cayden McFarland. Appreciate it, Cayden. Thanks for taking the time today.
My pleasure. Love all the content you guys are putting out. Is this the one where Eddie curses or the one where he doesn't curse?
This is the one that I
Which one am
usually,
on?
yeah, I kind of have to mind my P's and Q's, but, we'll see.
Can we curse on YouTube?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we can
Well-
definitely curse.
Then maybe we will.
We maybe need to
So you
break
want
that
me
in.
to do the cursing this week?
Yeah.
We can do a little cursing, then we'll all go into a confession together afterwards. Let's just start here. First year for Kevin Wilson. It's been, I think, an interesting ride. It's something that me and you have talked about before, Cayden, just in terms of the undertaking that he's or the overtaking that he's having to do in trying to rebuild the Tulsa football program that has had a lot of success. They just haven't had it recently. How big is this rebuild that Kevin Wilson has kind of inherited?
It's not huge, to be honest. Philip Montgomery, the worst thing he did was field a buttoned-up, disciplined football team. They just shot themselves in the foot a ton, but he brought in quite a bit of talent, right? Tyler Smith was a first-round pick. Zaven Collins was a first-round pick. Justin Wright and Anthony Goodlow were helping Oklahoma State this year. So he did a pretty good job of recruiting. Now, I just mentioned Wright and Goodlow; those guys left, and so a number of the guys he's recruited have hit the portal and are. But enough of it remains, and especially at quarterback, where we felt good about Braylon Braxton coming into the year. Enough of it remains that I think this team can be competitive right away in the American Athletic Conference. That said, that is a far cry from what they had to deal with last week at Washington and what they have to deal with this week against Oklahoma. And I think it's not a huge rebuild for Kevin. Especially as sharp as he is, but he needs the quarterback to be right. And they've played 3 of them in the first 2 games, and I think it's put them behind the 8 ball with regard to offensive rhythm and consistency and just progression. And so they've been dealt a bit of a difficult hand to start the season here. And look, this week, in my opinion, the best thing they can do is get out of here without injuries and get on to the games that really will affect this season the most. And what's so difficult for this program, and especially this university about that, is this is the first sellout at TU since 2009. And so you have these competing interests, right? You have the opportunity to put your program, new coach on display. You don't have to win this ball game to impress people. But at the same time, you can see this thing go south in a hurry, just like we did last year, the Ole Miss game. They went to Oxford, unloaded the chamber. They were leading the game when their quarterback, Davis Brin, hurt his ankle. He gets hurt, and it kind of derailed the season. Philip Montgomery might still be the coach if Davis Brin had made it out of that game unscathed. And so these blood games are they have to play 2 of them this year because the previous athletic director just could not raise money. And in my opinion, it's just too much. It puts the program in a tough spot.
Cayden, you mentioned Kevin Wilson. Everyone here at Oklahoma knows him for his offense. Take us through who are some of the playmakers to watch on this group, maybe guys that could stand out. I know quarterback is a position we were just talking before we got on here. Sounds like there's like 3 or 4 different guys that could end up playing quarterback on Saturday. But who are some playmakers on this TU team?
Well, I liked the quarterback position to start the year. Braylon Braxton finished last year. He was a redshirt freshman then, redshirt sophomore now. He finished the year beating Houston, finished the year with 15 total touchdowns against only 2 interceptions. And then he was absolutely awful out of the gates against Arkansas Pine Bluff. Only played, I think, 3 series and threw 2 interceptions and hurt his ankle along the way. And I don't think it's like a high ankle sprain that's going to be a problem all year long or for a whole bunch of weeks, but he's certainly not 100% right now. They brought in Cardell Williams, and he led several touchdown drives in a row, hit 13 of 14 in that game against Pine Bluff, showed some real promise, but he wasn't up to the task last week at Washington. That Washington team, by the way, is really, really good. He completed 6 of 14 through an end zone interception. Kevin said that he bruised his hand, hitting it on somebody's helmet, so he pulled Cardell, went to Roman Fuller. Third string quarterback did a decent job and was able to sustain some drives and led their only touchdown drive of the day. So all the quarterbacks are at least okay. Braylon is the guy you would need to put any sort of scare into OU. And you would not only need Braylon, but you would need him at 100%. And I think having already played 2 really good games leading into this one, and that just isn't the case. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like, TU fans may watch this and just hate that I'm saying it, but I feel like their chances are almost sunk before this thing even starts, simply because of the quarterback position and what I've seen from OU's defense so far. In my opinion, you shouldn't even probably play Braylon Braxton this week. I've seen Danny Stutzman already this year show the guy is all over the field, and I can imagine if the plan was to use a lot of quarterback run game and short passing game, he would just eat up almost everything, and you risk the injury, further injury for Braylon. So when you talk about playmakers, the running backs are good. Anthony Watkins is actually the guy with the most talent. 2 years ago, he averaged more than 7 yards per carry, but he's been in the doghouse. Last year, he didn't play because of academic ineligibility, and he remains in the doghouse at the moment for reasons that are a little unknown. So your most talented back is the guy they list fourth on the depth chart, even though he has carried the ball some, mostly in mop-up duty so far this year. Jordan Ford is the starter. He's okay. He'll break some tackles. And at receiver, Marquise Shoulders was good in the first game, got deep on 180-yard plays, got a little bit of speed. Braylon Presley is the guy that certainly Eddie knows probably the best. His career at Bixby was about as decorated as anybody we've ever seen in Oklahoma high school football. He caught 3 balls for 54 yards last week. He's probably a guy that they'll have to find if they're going to make a play against this Sooners defense. But if I'm being honest, this is not – they don't have great skill position talent even for Tulsa traditionally, and that makes this matchup, I think, just really, really tough on Saturday.
Real quick, offensive line-wise, there are 3 names that are quite familiar, I think, for anybody in the state of Oklahoma. Will Farniok, the little brother of Derek Farniok that played at Oklahoma. Daryl Simpson's a transfer from Oklahoma, as well as Bryce Bray, who started his career at Oklahoma State and then now is back home in Tulsa, a Bixby product himself. How have they held up through the first 2 games, first 8 quarters of the Tulsa season?
It hasn't been bad. They were able to play some keep away against Washington. They were good for the most part against Pine Bluff. It is, on the whole, a veteran group with some pretty good size. I really trust Kevin Wilson to put an offensive line in good positions, not ask them to do things that they can't do. It's been okay. It's so difficult for a line, one, to look good coming out of the gates, especially with the new coach, new offensive scheme. And then I think it becomes almost impossible when your quarterback situation is what it's been for TU. So again, they come into this ball game just unable to have found any sort of rhythm so far offensively. That doesn't mean it's all been bad. Under the best of circumstances, if Braylon was playing great, if they had just a little bit more skill position talent, I could see Kevin Wilson dialing up the sort of, game plan that could make things uncomfortable for OU for a while. I'm just not sure that the healthy quarterback is going to allow TU to do that. Now, I've said all this. It's been doom and gloom from the TU side with every answer so far, which of course means this game's probably going to be about 14-10 at the half.
Oh, God.
Sooner fans are going to be your message boards are going to be.
Don't wish that upon us. You know how they get.
Defensively, Cayden, I want to ask you.
I have some idea. Eddie has dragged me on Twitter a time or two. I know exactly what that's like. I respect the passion, OU fans. Love you guys. Love you, knuckleheads.
Oh, boy, if it's 14-10. Cayden, I want to ask you about defensively. I know that there was I think it took a while for Kevin to hire a defensive coordinator, if I remember correctly. What does that side of the ball look like so far? OU's coming off a game where a lot of fans are kind of upset with how they performed. What is there any chance that TU can slow down OU?
Good question. One thing that worries me for TU this week is simply that I think OU's offense comes into this ballgame probably in a bit of a bad mood based on the way last week went, probably more willing to take some deep shots because of the way last week's game plan went, probably more willing to get those really talented running backs involved, Sawchuk and Barnes. And I don't know how well TU is going to hold up inside. They've been pretty good so far. I like the defensive ends, Owen Ostrowski, another Oklahoma kid, and Ben Kopinski, who transferred in from Oklahoma State. When he was able to get on the field at OSU, he was a guy who actually made some plays, and he's been really good so far, certainly was in the Pine Bluff game. They've got some former Power 5 level recruits that have transferred. Jaden Simon, right in the middle of that defensive line, came over from Colorado, and his brother Julian Simon was at USC. He's now, playing kind of middle linebacker for TU. And then on the back end, they've got good size. For years now, George, you may not know this, having been out of the state for a couple of years, but Eddie knows there were years in which you could look at multiple position groups on the defense, and TU looked better than OU. I mean, it's been a fiasco, obviously, for the Sooners defensively for a decade, but certainly when they had Zabin Collins, OU would have traded their linebackers for TU's, in 2020. And then on the back end, Philip Montgomery did a great job of recruiting length at safety and corner, and some of that still remains. A guy named Kendaren Ray leads the team in tackles at the moment. He's been around now. This is his 5th year. He's a guy who can make some plays, former high school quarterback. I think that what they will not face a better passing attack this week than they faced last. If you look at some of the advanced metrics, it's USC number 1 in the country and Washington right behind them. Michael Penix and what they've got going at Washington is really, really good. And TU was able to keep everything in front of them. So I assume that'll be the game plan again, just like SMU did with OU. I assume TU is going to want to try and keep everything in front, make them snap it again, make OU earn it. I worry about that group a little bit simply because it's the second week of this brutal stretch. I think they did a great job holding Washington to 43. They would probably do a great job holding OU to about 42 or 43 as well this week.
You talked about the ends. Inside, I know that Oklahoma fans walk out of last week's game against SMU probably not happy with what they're doing at guard, center guard, Savion Byrd, Troy Everett, that mix. What does Tulsa have in terms of an interior defensive line?
Well, Simon's been really solid in the middle. Washington wasn't able to run the ball. That might be more of a Washington problem.
Sure.
Or simply that, what they're able to do throwing the ball. Why even bother? I don't know exactly. They were fine against Pine Bluff, but that's Pine Bluff. Against Washington, they were able to hold up enough. And part of that's linebackers fitting it as well. The defense has been, for the most part, solid. Now, Washington obviously put up a whole bunch of yards and points, but it wasn't because TU was a mess. That's just because Washington is exceptional with a wide receiving core that it may be the best in the country. Certainly one of the best I've seen in recent years. So far, under new defensive coordinator Chris Polizzi, it's been pretty solid, but it's too early to know exactly what they are. They're pretty similar to what they were under Joe Gillespie, who installed the defense a few years ago and really got the thing cooking at TU. Which is to say, I don't think they're going to give up a ton of big plays. It starts with that. Don't beat yourself. But it's also not an exceptional group that if I were OU, I would feel like I can do either or, right? It just depending upon what the numbers are. There should be success running the ball, whether that's Walker or some of the guys with a little bit more juice, or Gabriel, hitting short stuff or intermediate stuff. I think TU's going to give some of that. And what's going to be interesting for me, Jeff Levy probably in a bad mood for more reason than one this week. How much does he push the deep shot passing game if it isn't necessarily there? I wonder if OU forces some of that just to placate, or if they simply take what TU gives them. If they do and OU's on it, they should have a pretty good day. If they don't, to me, that's sort of a red flag about what this OU offense is. If there is a second straight week against a team at this level, an AAC team, where your offense isn't able to do as it pleases, that'll be interesting to me.
Cayden, I want to ask you about just the expectations this year for Tulsa. I don't know where they ended up in the media poll in the AAC, but first year under Kevin Wilson, I mean, what are the expectations? Bowl game, win a few games. I mean, I know that the test is huge this Saturday, just like it was last Saturday, but long term, what is the expectation this year?
Well, I think they were picked 9th.
Yeah.
And maybe it was even lower than that. They never start the season with great expectations from the outside. That said, of the teams in the American this year, TU actually has won more conference games than any of them over the last 3 seasons. And most of that goes back to the 2020 year where they run undefeated in regular season play. But still, they've played better ball than they probably get credit for over the last 2 or 3 years, and really have had better players, certainly, than they get credit for, and have just kind of shot themselves in the foot. I think the expectation is find a way to win 6, play in a bowl game. Everybody would feel good about that. Have the offense cooking by the end of the year. I kind of fully expect that with Kevin Wilson, regardless of who the quarterback is. But mostly people want to see TU fans a more disciplined unit. It was a problem for 8 years. They were near the bottom every single year in penalties. It just became a hallmark of a Philip Montgomery coach team. I think Kevin Wilson is the right guy to go to at this moment because of that. And, his ability to call plays, Eddie and I think have talked about this in the past. I think, we agree. Kevin Wilson to me is really pretty underrated.
Yeah.
For a guy who's
100%.
had the success he's had at Oklahoma and Ohio State, I've said multiple times over the last 20 years of college football, I'm not sure any offensive coach or play caller has had a hand in more yards being gained or more points being scored than Kevin Wilson over the last 2 decades. And that's what makes this matchup really cool. Head coach Brent Venables, I think, is widely considered the best defensive coordinator in college football over the last 20 years. And you could make a case for Kevin Wilson being right there. I mean, I guess depending upon what you think of Lincoln Riley's head coach / OC, but like Kevin Wilson's right there, really, really high caliber. So I think TU's got the right guy. It will always remain a job with a ton of challenges. Personally, I think Kevin would like to turn this thing around in short order and be gone within a couple years, just based on his age and some of his connections and maybe where he would like to get to as a head. Here's the thing. It's hard to be an offensive coordinator at OU, then be a head coach in the Big Ten, then be an offensive coordinator at Ohio State, where if anybody does it bigger and better than OU, it's those guys. I mean, there's only a couple. That is as good as it gets in college football. It's hard to go from that to the restrictions you have at TU, where getting an indoor built feels like an impossibility, and you're fighting so many different battles. So I think he's the right guy for the moment to improve this program and leave it in a better place. And I think he's a heck of a ball coach. I don't know that it'll show this Saturday, because I just don't think he has a winning hand. But I think by the end of the year, we will all think, I think TU made a pretty good hire there.
Yeah, and I think that, just last comment from me, what they've been able to do just in terms of recruiting the 918 and going out and actually going to an Owasso or going by a Jinx or going by a Bixby or going by a Union. There's enough talent up there that I think you can get by with Tulsa, and I think that, it kind of came back to bite Philip Montgomery a little bit. It's going to be like a family reunion this week with Steve Spurrier Jr. on the staff, Dom Franks, Kevin Wilson, obviously, as well. So final one from me, just in terms of, you've been down to Norman, just from the outside looking in a way. From coming down from Tulsa, what have you thought about the Oklahoma product through 2 games?
Well, I probably was drinking a little too much of the Kool-Aid after the win over Arkansas State.
They're a bad football team. Arkansas State's a bad football team.
They're real bad. I'm impressed with the defense. I think that I know that we got tired of hearing the term competitive depth.
Sure.
But Brent's right. The competitive depth, especially on defense, has changed things. I think it is better. I think that Brent is doing all the things you need to do to make pretty steady progress. I love the fact that OU is going into the SEC and the SEC stinks all of a sudden. How about the first 2 weeks for that conference?
Yeah, no kidding.
What luck the Sooners have. I think the future's bright. I think I love some of the guys in the freshman and sophomore class, and yet I think we'll get to the end of the year and this team simply will not be as good as its record. And if they're in college football playoff contention somehow, which seems very difficult at this moment based on what Texas just did in Tuscaloosa, but if that happens, it's hard for me to imagine them actually being deserving of a top 4 spot. Just don't think they're ready for that, but I think they are making progress without question. One question I have for you guys, how many players on the OU roster right now do you think would start for Texas?
Yeah, you asked me the other day. I think the 2 that come to mind, Tyler Guyton, Danny Stutzman, I think without question, probably slide in. There's a lot of other question marks.
I think OU's better at safety. Billy Bowman.
I could buy that.
I like Bowman.
I could buy that.
I mean, I would even say a Woody Washington.
In time, Peyton Bowen's going to be there.
I think a Woody Washington would maybe start for Texas. I think Woody Washington is one of the more underrated players.
So I fully expect this to be like the 2013 Red River game. Well, no, actually, that 2013 OU team wasn't very good. But think of one of those games where Texas either put a scare into them or pulled the upset. I fully expect OU now with a team that I think is completely undermanned to go beat Texas and make the Big 12 weird, wild, and unable to make the playoff probably.
Cayden, before we let you get out of here, I just had one quick question about Saturday. What do you think the percentage-wise will be OU fans to TU fans? Because I know there's a lot of OU fans out there that went and bought season tickets just to get into the game on Saturday. I mean, do you think TU fans will show out? I mean, what do you think? I remember last time I went, I think it was the last time OU played there, 2014, and it was just a sea of red. Is that the expectation again on Saturday?
Oh, there's going to be a whole lot of red, no question. Yeah. I'd start at about 50-50 and say it's somewhere in there. I think TU attendance probably is about 15 or 16,000 for most games. Surely they can count on those folks, right? And then a little bit more. But it's going to be close to 50-50. It's certainly going to feel, if OU gets it going, like an OU home game. And look, I was here in 2014, the last time this happened. OU won 52-7 with an OU team that wasn't even, turned out to be not even that good. It's still just fun for us. Stillwater's an hour and a half away. That Norman drive just feels like it gets longer and longer for me. It's nice to be able to wake up in my bed and know that we've got a big game to cover and it's just down the road. So I'm going to enjoy this thing, even though I think TU's outmanned. And God, it sounds like I was so negative about this. I really do think the future is bright for TU. I just do not love the way it shapes up this week. I think OU's on the come, and I think TU's struggling a bit, especially at the most important position. But it's going to be a fun Saturday. It'll be festive with the blue and the red. But, yeah, it'll be about a 50-50 split if I had to guess.
It should be a lot of fun. We're coming your way. We're headed up the Turner Turnpike Northeast on
Saturday. Want to do a Friday
Saturday.
Night Live segment with me on Friday? You want to call some highlights, Eddie?
I could probably do that, actually.
Want to come to the studio?
I can do that. Can I? You won't breathalyze me when I come in, will you?
Say that again.
You won't make me do a breathalyzer when I come in, because George said he's going to take me out on the town downtown in Tulsa.
Oh my goodness! So you're going to be drinking that early, huh? I'm rethinking the open invitation. I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, I'll have mints.
No breathalyzer. No.
I'll have
what
mints.
happens.
I'll have mints with me.
Call one highlight. How about that?
We could do that. We appreciate it, Cayden. He is Cayden McFarland, KJRH Sports Director. We will see you on Saturday.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Cayden.
Once again, a special thank you to Cayden McFarland, KJRH up in Tulsa. Stumbling over my words there. I just
sounded
get
like
nervous.
a voice crack. Sounded like a voice crack.
Did my voice crack?
Just a little bit.
Oh no. Well, that's not a good look for me. I'm way too old to be doing that. Maybe someday. It is going to be an interesting matchup. As Cayden said, it's not probably the team that Kevin Wilson would like to be throwing at Washington and Oklahoma back-to-back weeks, but it is a friendly foe in Kevin Wilson, and I know that you're writing about him in an article that will drop on SoonerScoop.com on Friday. It's been a lot of fun for you to catch up with some of his former players, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, I talked to a small handful of guys that played for him. Some awesome, fun stories that they shared with me. Kevin Wilson, everybody knows, is a very intense football coach. So to hear some of those was a lot of fun. Hearing from Brody Eldridge, who Kevin spoke about in his press conference this week, and some of his favorite players. It was fun. And I think thinking about the game, is Tulsa going to be a good matchup for OU in terms of athletes? No. But knowing Kevin Wilson, he's going to have his team ready to play. He's going to throw some things at Brent Venables that will test this defense. I mean, he's one of the best play callers in college football, has been for a long time. So I think it's going to be kind of fun to see it. Both of them spoke very highly of each other, and it was fun catching up, like I said, with those players, hearing about some of those very intense battles back in 2006 to 2010 when both those guys were the coordinators at OU. I mean, think about the football then too. They were so good during those years, and a large part of that was the intensity that they brought out to the practice field. And they had great athletes, but that competitive spirit, I think, is kind of what brought out the best in those teams.
Here is Kevin Wilson at his weekly press conference on Tuesday, reminiscing about his times down in Norman.
You want me to ask you about Brody's hands, Kevin? Brody Eldridge.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite players.
I feel like I should ask him.
I never watched him practice because I knew he was going to block his guy every play.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
And not have bad hands, but just a little almost like a lineman. wasn't quite big, but moved. So his ability to get open wasn't as good as. And the fans still ripped me for Gresham, who had caught 2 touchdowns and was the leading receiver in the Orange Bowl, but because I didn't throw it to him every play, we lost that game, so it's my fault.
Is there anything you want to air that you had never got to say back then?
15? No, I am very appreciative of the kids I coached.
Sure.
It was a great story is one year I think Jermaine was first team All-League and Brody was like second team, and then Matt Clapp was an honorable mention. And I came in to practice and said, man, there must be a lot of bad players in this league if all 3 of you guys make all conference. And then a week later, I won the Broyles Award for the top coach. And I went out to stretch, and Brody said, hey, Coach, Jermaine's got something. And I said, what? And he said, Jermaine said, a lot of bad coaches out there, ain't they? So I just appreciated that my players were listening.
just knowing Jermaine Gresham, because that 2008 team, I was in college at the time, so I knew a bunch of those guys.
Yeah. Which,
by the way, all they did was average a nation-leading 51 points per game, 547.9 yards per game as well. I probably would have died. I told you the other day, I probably would have died in Miami that night, so it's probably a good thing that it all went down the way that it did. I don't know. Just being around Aaron Hernandez probably would have been, somewhat interesting. But I'm sure that Jermaine Gresham – what?
Nothing.
I'm sure that Jermaine Gresham, the way that he delivered that, there was probably a little bit more colorful language than Kevin shared.
Yeah.
But it has been fun hearing some of the stories and just hearing Brent talk about going head-to-head with Kevin Wilson in some of those practices. I know that, leading into that bowl game against Florida down at the Orange Bowl, that entire month with Sam being hurt with his hand, I know that some of those practices were pretty intense. And I know that you talked to John Nemo about some of the practice stuff with Kevin Wilson. I can't wait for people to read about that on Friday.
John Nemo is a character, man.
Love John Nemo. Shout out John Nemo. One of the greatest holders and one of the greatest fake plays in the history of Oklahoma football. That was dropped by James Hanna. What year did we say that
2010, Texas A&M, I believe.
2010, Texas. He still talks about it to this day.
Yeah, he told me all about it on the phone. Again, lots of good stories. I don't want to spoil it all.
Yeah.
Brody Eldridge has a great story in there about a game against Colorado. John Nemo remembers a few practices. Trent Rattery was great.
Everybody knows how intense Brent is. And I think that people probably forget, and maybe just aren't aware of it, how intense Kevin Wilson is. I mean, he was absolutely, and I say this lovingly, he was insane. There was a point where he was insane. But, I think the one thing that you talk about and, kind of the basis of what we've learned about Kevin Wilson is he loves his players a lot. And, it's something that I think when you look at the Tulsa program moving forward, I'm really excited about what they could build. I know Cayden talked about it in the interview that we did in the preview. If they can just continue to recruit the 918 area code, it seems like that thing's going to be headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think John Nemo said it best. He said, as a player, you hated him, but as a man, you loved him. And I think that goes a long ways. And, I listened to Kevin's, press conference this week, and he talked about how he's learned a lot as a head coach, his time at Indiana.
Sure.
And, he said that he was maybe too harsh at times on guys when he was a younger coach. I think Brent would say the same thing.
Everybody's had to adapt a little bit the way that people coach nowadays.
Exactly. But I think the way that he coaches, the way that, one, he's just a brilliant offensive mind.
Sure.
I mean, we talk about, we've seen Lincoln Riley. I mean, Kevin Wilson's, in that same tier as a play caller. I mean, he's been one of the best in college football. I mean, he helped invent the up-tempo and spread offense. I mean, he was one of the originators of that. So, I think that he's going to have Tulsa heading in the right direction. It's interesting, he's, I think, 61 years old. So for him to take this head coaching job at this time in his career, I think is really interesting. And as somebody that grew up in Tulsa, I think it'd be awesome to see that program have success. We've seen it in the past. Tulsa's been a good football program, like Cayden said. Some of those statistics of how many games they've won. So I think it'd be really, I don't think it'll happen in year one for Kevin Wilson.
No.
But if he can stick it out there for a while, I think he could really help that program. And there's a lot of talent in that area. So I think he'll be able to recruit. And he knows that. I mean, he knows the talent in the state of Oklahoma. So I think it's great to have him back here in Oklahoma. And it's going to be fun to kind of watch them from a distance.
2005, 2008, it seemed like, with Steve Cragthorpe to Todd Graham, and then who was it? Bill Blankenship, and then Philip Montgomery, and now Kevin Wilson. So it's going to be a lot of fun as we head up there on Saturday. Real quick, injury situation. We've talked about it on the Unofficial 40 on the podcast this week. I think it could be said best. We're both pretty worried about Justin Harrington.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of rumors floating out there what exactly it is, but what we can tell you is, he got hurt, I think, sometime in the first quarter, put on a knee brace there and played through it the rest of the game.
Just watching the game back early this week, I don't think that I realized how hurt he was, like how bad, how labored he was out on the field.
Yeah, no, he was definitely kind of limping around out there, and what he was definitely not 100%, and I'm sure that they gave him something to help him play through the rest of the game. But then seeing him out at practice, and again, we don't get to see them actually practice, but just see him walking around and the wrap that he had on, it just doesn't seem good for him. And I just hope that he can return at some point this season. We'll see. But I certainly don't think wewe're going to see him Saturday, and it might be a little bit before we do actually see him again. The good news, though,
gut feel on Deshaun?
I think he's going to play. That was just about what I was going to say. Is I think he's going to play. He's definitely going to suit up. I mean, he suited up last week and didn't go through warm-ups. I think there's a chance he tries and gives it a go. Maybe not. Maybe they hold him out and say, hey, we're playing Tulsa this week. Do we really need him? That wouldn't shock me either. But for Brent to say they're hopeful, I would assume that means he's going to try and give it a go this week.
Well, and I think if anything, you need to get Deshaun McCullough some reps.
Yeah, exactly.
Just get him some reps out on the field. I think that it feels like he's been around here for forever, but they've only played 2 games, and he's played in about a quarter and a half of one. Because the blowout in the season opener against Arkansas State.
Even if it's just a couple series on Saturday, I think that would be great for him. And even if it's in mop up duty, whatever it is, just get him out on the field. Also test out that ankle a little bit. I'm sure that would help him feel a little bit more comfortable because they're going to need him come conference play, especially if Justin's out for a while.
Ginter Williams came back into the game on Saturday. I don't think that could even be anything close to an injury situation. I think he's good. I think they just rolled with Kenai Walker, and it was good to see Robert Spears Jennings, another Tulsa native, Broken Arrow kid. He got back on the field on Saturday as well. So that's it. Oklahoma, Tulsa coming up on Saturday. Score prediction real quick.
I'll go Oklahoma. I think the offense gets it going again, 52-13.
Yeah. I was gonna say 52-14.
Oh wow!
I'll go 59-11. How about
nice.
that? I'll just to be different, 59-11.
So they cover.
I think that they should.
They should. Yeah.
They should,
especially with hearing about the quarterback situation. It'll be tough for them to score.
And we talked about this in the office real quick before we sign off. So I know that producer Carrie's going to love this. That we're going to try to go over an hour again. It's one of those things. If this team is somebody that we think that they could be, you go up and not only do you control the game, but I think that you try to dominate the game in a way that Oklahoma's. You've toyed around with teams before. Is this going to be a team that can go and kind of assert itself and bounce back from, what was a less than stellar performance a week ago, even though you end up winning by 17?
Well, I think look back at last year. One of the biggest red flags to me was that Kent State game.
Right.
And I don't know if any of us really saw it. They ended up winning that game, I think, 33-3 or whatever it was. But that was a red flag where they had to struggle with a team like that.
It's when you get into like a POS car and you got to crank it a couple times to make sure. But once it gets going, you're good.
Right.
But it's the first couple times.
That should not happen. Especially
public school kid here. He's a private school kid. I know about the crank. You know what I mean?
But I think that they should be a little bit pissed off from last week, especially the offense. I think that they should come out trying to put some points up early. This is a Tulsa defense that's okay, but OU should be able to score on them pretty easily. So I think that you're exactly right, Eddie. They should come out, want to dominate this game. And it's not only feeling pissed off about last week, but saying, hey, conference play starts next week.
Yeah.
We need to get the momentum headed in the right direction.
And all of a sudden, a trip to Nippert Stadium next week, maybe a little bit tougher than we thought at the beginning of the season. He's George Stoya. I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll talk to you right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel with a post-game wrap-up from Chapman Stadium on Saturday.